Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views on September 11th, 2025, 24th anniversary of the sad and sick attacks in New York City and in Washington, D.C. 24 years ago. And as you can tell today, I'm a bit emotionally drained because yesterday we lost one of the good ones, as many of you in this country know. Many of you overseas may not be aware of how significant and important the young man by the name of Charlie Kirk was to this effort to maintain the traditional pillars and foundations of our civilization. Before we get to that, I need to remind you that we do have a vid chat tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. The deadline, I had to move last week's vid chat to this coming week due to some weather problems, potential weather problems, and also some personal issues that I just had to take care of. So last week's vid chat is in fact tomorrow's vid chat. That's why I'm not mentioning the deadline. I extended the deadline through Saturday evening at 10 o'clock. So most of you have already submitted your questions and comments. I appreciate all of you with your patience in this time when the weather can play havoc with our schedule, and my personal problems can play havoc with it as well. But getting back to the story of the day, everybody else has weighed in on this very sad event. I'm going to, of course, express my deeply heartfelt sympathies for Mr. Kirk's family, for his wife, for his two young children, for his parents, his in-laws. We lost a good one today. I say that as someone who did not always agree with everything that Mr. Kirk said. But he was young enough that I think some of those disagreements may have evolved over time or dissolved over time. I don't know. But we lost a good one. I'm going to confine my remarks today to a short article that appeared on the Gateway Pundit because already there are disturbing reports of anomalies with this event. No interpretation of what happened can bring Mr. Kirk back. And I will have something to say about that as well at the end of my remarks today. The article that I'm referring to is titled Breaking. FBI and Utah officials have good footage of Kirk shooter. They tracked him from an hour before the shooting. What an admission there, folks. To when he jumped off the building. In other words, they track this guy. They have video, apparently, of him on top of the roof and then jumping off. So my question is, where was the security? And he ran through the neighborhood. They found the weapon in the woods. I'm going to read this whole thing to you because it's quite important. The headline alone is already screaming for the anomalies that it is containing. Quote, FBI and Utah Department of Public Safety officials hold a news conference in Orem following the fatal shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. Kirk was assassinated while addressing students yesterday at the university. Authorities provide updates on the suspect's search and investigation. According to the local investigator who spoke to reporters, officials tracked the killer from an hour before the shooting when he jumped off the campus building and fled into a local neighborhood. Utah official Bo Mason, quote, said the following, quote, through all that work last night, we were able to make a few breakthroughs. We were able to track the movements of the shooter. Starting at 11:52 a.m., the subject arrived on campus. Shortly away from campus, we have tracked his movements onto the campus, through the stairwells, up to the roof, across the roof to a shooting location. After the shooting, we were able to track his movements as he moved to the other side of the building, jumped off the building, and fled off of the campus into a neighborhood. Our investigators have worked through those neighborhoods, contacting anybody they can with doorbell cameras, witnesses, and have thoroughly worked those communities trying to identify any leads. We do have good video footage of this individual. We are not going to release that at this time. We are working through some technologies and some ways to identify this individual. If they have good footage, folks, they've already identified him. To continue. If we are unsuccessful, we will reach out to you as the media and we will push that publicly to help us identify them. Now notice the change of pronoun there. Let me read that last sentence again. If we are unsuccessful, we will reach out to you as the media and we will push that publicly to help us identify them. But we are confident in our abilities right now, and we would like to move forward in a manner that keeps everyone safe and moves this process appropriately. The FBI official Robert Bowles then spoke and said that they have good footage of the killer. They also found his rifle in the woods. And again, you can do a certain amount of tracking of the individual through the weapon itself, if, of course, it's legal. If not, in any case, Bill Milligan added the killer appears to be college-aged. Now, here's the problem, folks. As I've pointed out with this article, there are already some apparently glaring discrepancies about this event. I've been reliably informed by one of the regular contributors of articles to this website, and incidentally one of the members of this website, that apparently a private jet took off approximately an hour after the incident from Provo Airport and then was promptly lost on radar. This individual then sent me a tracking number of the airplane's registration number, the number that appears oftentimes on the tail fin of airplanes. And that number was returned the result that the number was not able to be tracked due to some sort of error message, which led this individual and me and some others to conclude that whatever was going on had already become a national security matter. There are apparently people giving hand signals in some of the videos behind Mr. Kirk just before he was sadly shot. The other thing to note is that it only took one shot, and it was deadly and fatal. It was mortal. And that has led some people to conclude that this was a thoroughly professional hit, and I myself incline to that view. So the question is, who are they going to pick as the patsy? Because we're also hearing reports that the recovered weapon had all sorts of anti-Charlie slogans, apparently painted or otherwise inscribed on the weapon, which does not sound at all like a professional hit. So in other words, there's anomalies to this. We shouldn't be surprised. What I suspect, unfortunately, is that this is not the end. I suspect we're only going to see an increase of this kind of violent activity against anybody that espouses any sort of traditionalist worldview, because the rhetoric has been ginned up by those on the radical left for several years. And no, Mr. Obama, no, Mr. Newsom, and no, all the rest of you, Mr. Biden, who've expressed your quote-unquote sympathies. while you yourselves have fed that rhetoric and endorsed policies leading to events like this, or the tragic death of the Ukrainian lady, a young woman that came to this country to begin a new life free from the war zone that this country is responsible for creating in her country. I'm not buying your crocodile tears. Save it. I suspect that this event is not the last. Anybody at this juncture, I think, who espouses any sort of traditionalist view is now a target. That's the sad reality. I was listening to a well-known commentator earlier today who said that what we've got to understand is that this is no longer politics. This is a spiritual struggle. And the people that are doing these things are beyond reasoned negotiation or discussion. We've reached a bellwether moment in a way I think that not even was reached with the attempted assassinations on the president last year, that was not even reached, although it was certainly close to the cusp, when the young lady was murdered in Charlotte. I think we've reached a bellwether. And I suspect that what it means is these types of events will increase, but so will the resolve to bring these people to justice. And if the government doesn't do it, if it is unable to find the perpetrator and make an absolutely convincing, transparent case before the American people and before a court of law of the guilt of the individual, and serve and mete out justice for this act, then I think we've turned a corner here. That if the government proves itself incapable, unfortunately, I think the reaction on the right is going to be increasingly the same sort of vigilantism that we're seeing from the radical left. As for the expressions of joy at the demise of Mr. Kirk, a father and a husband and a son, that so many have displayed, including the reprehensible, hateful, demonic display that we saw in the American Congress as attempts were made to pray for him on the part of the party of evil and chaos and every manner of viciousness and vile behavior that we've seen in the last 20 years. I can't begin to describe. And I'm very fearful at this juncture of a bad backlash. So that's it, folks, for today's news and views. Don't forget we do have the vid chat tomorrow. Requiescat in pace Domini nostri, Charlie Kirk. We'll see you on the flip side, everybody. Bye-bye, and God bless.